Does alcohol cause cancer?
Yeah, so there's been a bit of hoopla, so to speak, about this recently with the latest Surgeon General warnings about alcohol causing cancer. And if we look at the total available evidence, right, because all of that is very important, and we've known this for quite some time, so it's kind of shocking that now people are kind of upset about this. Is again, if we look at the total available evidence, alcohol is indeed a carcinogen and can cause cancer. Now, it doesn't mean that it's always going to cause cancer, but because it has the ability to do so as a carcinogen, it can if people drink enough. Does that keep things simple enough for you?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, alcohol can cause cancer.
And so, what exactly did the Surgeon General say?
It was basically just a report saying that based on all of the available evidence, alcohol can strongly cause cancer and that people should essentially just try and avoid it as much as possible, which again is everything we've been saying for the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years of research about the relationship between alcohol and cancer. And obviously, over time, we acquire more and more evidence, especially mechanistic evidence, to show how alcohol um, can induce different types of cancers or put people at risk for cancers. Um, so it's really just reciprocating the same messaging with, I guess, more evidence on top to just support it.
And so, how exactly, in your understanding, does alcohol cause cancer? Like the way I guess I think of it is, I
Mhm.
mean, it can be thought of in a few ways. One is it like a direct, like it just because it's a carcinogen. If people abuse it, it causes some sort of cancer cells, or does it over time just kind of deplete the body in a way that its natural systems aren't able to function in the way they're supposed to?
Sure. Now, like I said, the mechanistic stuff is very complicated about how alcohol can induce cancers, but being direct to the point, it's more so an overtime thing. So it's not like you drink a little bit of alcohol and you're going to get cancer. I think the general recommendation is you can handle about 1 to 2 drinks a day, which I still would think is kind of too much. But your body can handle a certain amount of alcohol, about 1 to 2 drinks per day, to where you won't exhibit um, issues with something like liver metabolism. So,
Mm.
as an example, when you drink alcohol, the alcohol enters into your body, into your bloodstream, um, and it's taken into cells in the liver. And actually, liver enzymes will break down alcohol in a variety of different reactions. It's a two-step chemical reaction to break down ethanol, essentially. And obviously, if we saturate the liver such that the enzymes can't break it down efficiently, over time, this can lead to scarring in the liver, which can reduce liver function, especially in people who drink alcohol over time. And that scarring can lead to continuous issues in the metabolism of the liver. And those metabolic issues over time can kind of create a snowball effect of other problems, which can then lead to the development of things like hepatocellular carcinoma, or in this case, liver cancer. That's just one mechanistic example, but we're not an isolated system of just liver tissue. We have many different organs. So our liver helps to control the metabolism amongst a variety of different organs like the bladder and the kidneys and those sorts of things, the pancreas, and even muscle tissue as feedback response as to how we, go about our lives consuming a variety of different nutrition, a variety of different foods. Um, so yeah, I mean, in general, just the more that somebody drinks, the more they're going to mess with their liver metabolism, and it's just going to put them at greater risks for cancers.
Yeah, and you've heard a lot over the last few years about the importance of limiting alcohol. Like if you've seen
Yeah,
people who's just say, like, if I'm going to be honest, like there's no benefit to drinking alcohol, like so just don't
yeah.
drink it at all. And it's because from like a performance standpoint, cognition, mental health,
Mhm.
sleep, etc. Like in your understanding of the literature, what other health problems does excessive consumption of alcohol cause that people might not be aware of?
Um, like I said, it can eventually lead, if people are drinking enough, it can lead to cirrhosis, just complete liver failure.
Right.
That's kind of the scarring of the liver that I'd mentioned, on top of kidney issues. Um, in general, it's just I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I enjoy the occasional beer. I enjoy the occasional cocktail. I don't drink 1 to 2 drinks per day, but I know that there's a certain amount of alcohol that my body can handle. And this is true for anybody. That's not even anecdotal.
Mm.
Um, but again, just keeping it simple. Like the more that people drink, it's going to come with greater risks for a variety of different cancer types. Not even just liver cancer. Um, and I don't. I guess the confusing thing to me behind the latest Surgeon General warning is, I guess I didn't realize how many people didn't realize that alcohol was pretty causative for cancers or can be causative for cancers. I assumed it was common knowledge just because, I'm actively immersed in this stuff. So I guess I was a little bit blinded by what the lay people are associated with in terms of the information that they gain. So I guess it's
Well, I
kind of a
think
good thing.
yeah, and I think to be fair, I think people understand. Most people, I should say, I think understand the risks of alcohol when it comes to drinking and driving, how it can impact
Sure.
relationships, how it can impact people who are susceptible to mental health issues and addiction, even
Mhm.
sleep. It's been talked about how it impacts sleep.
Yeah.
And I also think that the way alcohol impacts the liver, I think most people understand that it's not good for the liver. I
Yeah.
think what maybe changed is when the Surgeon General came out and they said it can cause potentially like contribute to 7 different types of cancer, not just liver.
Yeah.
It was like colon, throat, breast cancer in women.
Hmm.
Let me just see what other ones he named: breast, colon, throat, voice box,
Pancreatic.
esophagus, and
Hmm.
mouth. Um, and then also he stated, or the CDC I think has stated that it's the third like leading cause of preventable cancer or something like that.
Colorectal cancer.
Or just I mean I'm just reading it straight off of like the report. It says that according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, alcohol consumption is the third leading preventable cause of cancer in the United States
Oh, I see.
after tobacco and obesity. So I
Yeah.
think when people read that, they're like, "Oh crap, like how much am I drinking?" Like I think the 1 to 2 drinks per day thing doesn't surprise me.
Right.
I think people understand you can have a couple of drinks a day and be fine. I
Hmm.
think this is probably more of a wake up call for the people that maybe already have pre existing conditions or that are just going out and getting hammered every night.
Yeah, I also think it's an important topic of discussion too because for example, when you go abroad, you'll see that other countries will put labels on cigarettes and alcohol saying that this is a known carcinogen, as an example. You commonly see that in other countries. So I think one of the things that's positive that comes out of this, and what I think the Surgeon General is getting at, is that we can also add these labels onto alcoholic beverages saying, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this is a potential carcinogen. Maybe you want to control the amount of this substance that you're drinking. Just kind of a warning label, adding it to I guess, the extensive list, just as you would
Right.
potentially in other countries.
Yeah. And I think like people now, there's been labels on cigarettes in the US, I think
Mhm.
for years now, and people still continue to smoke cigarettes. People
Yeah.
are aware of the risks of even alcohol from a drinking and driving perspective, and they still get behind the wheel and drink and
Yeah.
drive. Or, I mean, and so I question, how much is this actually going to help? I mean, I think the main thing is it's now it's across mainstream media, so people are paying attention. It comes from the
Yeah.
Surgeon General, who I think people respect,
I'd
and
hope
they
so.
right. Um, and I mean, it's coming from the top. And I think before people who attacked alcohol, they were seen as being, prude or squares or not cool or whatever. And now I think
Right.
you're seeing, people who are very respectable in their fields being like, hey, like I gave up alcohol because, I mean, not even from an addiction perspective, but because I function better without it. And so I
Yeah.
think, I just also don't want to kind of make people feel like they're doing the wrong thing for drinking. It's more just about providing education for what
Yeah.
research
Yeah. I mean,
actually says.
yeah, and that's kind of that's what I try and do on my page too. It's really not about fear mongering, like I said, because our bodies can handle a certain amount of alcohol up to a certain point, and of course, it's going to vary slightly between people. But um, people just have to control the amount that they're drinking. I mean, it's simple, but there are behavioral things, especially in people's societies, that may make them more predisposed to pick up a beer or pick up a cocktail or something like that, where they're, something that might be easy for me or somebody else to say, hey, maybe I don't need to drink. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to other people, um, to not pick up alcoholic beverages. So, I mean,
Right.
that's also something important to consider. And I think having a more vivid warning on these drinks, and even like we see in other countries regarding like tobacco, a more like vivid label can help to kind of shock people a little bit. But I also worry, maybe you do as well, that especially Americans are very anti the system. In many cases, they'll often ignore that label just because they're like, yeah, fight the power.
When I think just Americans in general do things in excess, right? Like
Yeah,
nothing's ever enough. It's like more and more and more. It's like the American way, and
yeah,
which has gotten us a long way as a country, right? But there's certain things where it's
sure.
not good, right?
Hmm.
And I also think what's tough is it's so celebratory to drink, like in the U.S. Like
Yeah,
somebody turns a certain age, they go out and they drink. There's tailgating at
yeah.
sporting events.
We just had New
Um,
Year's Eve, right?
yeah, New Year. I mean,
I,
and I
I got
think
pretty drunk, if I'm being honest.
right, and I think that is very healthy to do um, throughout your life, as long as you're doing it legally and as long as you
Mhm.
like, know that it's the right thing for your overall health. I
Of
think the
course.
problem becomes where now societally there's so much pressure to drink that people have a hard time like giving up alcohol if they know it's the best thing for their health. They worry like, all right, like what am I going to look like if I'm the only one at this party not drinking? What am I going to look like if I'm out on a date and the person I'm on a date with has a drink and I have to say I want water or whatever? You know what I mean? And I think because of
Yeah.
the societal pressure, I think it makes it tougher. I don't think people should blame society. I think that will,
No, of
get them
course not.
nowhere. But I
Yeah.
think understanding that as a whole helps to be like, okay, this makes sense as to why I feel a certain way about it. But then that person ultimately has to take the right steps to better themselves and develop the self confidence to, stand up for what they believe is right in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, if I'm being honest, I only kind of got the courage to do so. Um, maybe in my mid 20s when I started exercising more and I just became more confident with myself as a person to be in those social settings and say, hey, I don't really want to drink, or maybe I can get a virgin cocktail or something like that, or even just a water. But this is kind of what I pointed out earlier regarding socioeconomic status, or even just people's groups of people that they hang out with. Oftentimes, it's really really hard to say no, and even if we can teach people to be more confident with those decisions because of the adverse effects of alcohol, hopefully it'll put them in a better position where they can say to their friends, hey, I don't want to drink, and they'll actually understand why and just be okay with it, or be like, you know what, you do you. But I also think that people just need to respect each other's decisions no matter the situation that they're in, even if it's at a party. But I know that's kind of a long shot,
Yeah.
because these issues have persisted for uh, much longer than I've been born. So yeah,
Right. And then people also have been fed lies like red wine is healthy for you. It's heart healthy, right?
yeah,
And I think there was I haven't seen it in a while. Somebody like said that you'd have to essentially, I don't remember the number, but it was like 10 liters or something of red wine in one sitting to get the amount of resveratrol that they say is beneficial for your health or something.
yeah. And
It's
actually, I think Mike Israetel was actually just talking about this on a podcast he was on. He
mhm.
mentioned actually the health benefits of wine, and he got some clapback from it from one of my friends. But it's as you point out, you need to drink so much wine that the amount of ethanol within the wine would vastly overdo the potential benefits of the resveratrol, or maybe even other polyphenols that you get in a particular wine, independent of the quality of wine.
Right.
So it's really not worth drinking wine for the health benefits. But there is something to be said about finding a balance. For example, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but I also know people drink to calm down. Um, Being uber stressed out, to the point of enabling depression or other poor mental health status, um, can enable pretty bad behaviors. So if I have a drink, maybe to calm down and try and relax a little bit, and it reduces my likelihood of doing other more dangerous things, there's a pro behind that, but it's a slippery slope, um, when it comes to drinking too, because at some point you drink too much that your inhibitions go out the window, and then it could even lead to doing even more risky behaviors. So there's something
Yeah,
to
I
be
mean,
said about that, in terms of de-stressing, but it's slippery.
yeah, I was going to ask. It's interesting you say that because I was going to ask you about like healthy user bias, which I think comes up a lot
Mhm.
in studies like this, where I would imagine people who drink excessively probably aren't exercising as much. They're not eating as well. They may be smoking cigarettes, and so I'm wondering if they accounted for that in the way they researched these things. Because at the end of the day, it's like a lot of poor things can happen when you drink as far as your
Sure.
I mean it definitely inhibits decision making skills, and you definitely tend to eat more when you're drinking. You definitely
Mhm.
make at times you can make worse off decisions for your life and stuff like that, or worse decisions than you would if you were sober.
Mhm.
um, so do you know if the research regarding alcohol and cancer has taken into account that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, this is true with any sort of epidemiological data, and we can't really ethically do, randomized control trials to assess ethanol, in relation to cancer, because that would imply that you actually give the people within the trial ethanol at pretty toxic doses to assess
Right.
risk. So we try and tease apart the statistics as best as we can, looking at people's demographics and their socioeconomic status, and maybe past use of tobacco and other behaviors, and other diseases that they might have. But realistically, it's never going to be perfect. Um, so all we can get is a strong correlation, but that's why it's important to have a combination of the mechanistic studies to know that alcohol, or ethanol in this case, can be a carcinogen. It can physically induce cancer formation, in mechanistic studies, but realistically, um, those studies are at very high doses, to suggest that, it would be carcinogenic in most cases. But if people consume enough of that alcohol over time, it can be carcinogenic. And I think that, in accordance to a variety of different things that we do in our environment, whether it's nutrition, whether it's how much we're exercising, reducing the amount of alcohol we consume is in our favor in general, as much as possible. And that's just keeping it simple. The evidence can only do so much. We can only do so much statistically, and ethically, for that matter. But I'm pretty confident in stating that ethanol is indeed a carcinogen, and that people need to do their best to reduce the amount of ethanol or alcoholic beverages they're consuming. But they can enjoy them occasionally, just as I do. I'm not a hypocrite. A lot of people consume alcohol, and that's just keeping it as basic for people. And um, I'm pretty sure that this messaging, honestly, will be repeated every year for the remainder of time, regarding alcohol, and people will continue to get upset about it every year. Um, but ultimately, this is just how it goes regarding,
Yeah.
ethanol consumption. We can say the same about tobacco consumption, and even like vaping and marijuana consumption, and other consumption of carcinogens in general.
Yeah, I did a series on cannabis last year on the podcast, and it was really well received. I mean, I got some pushback from people, but
You always will.
I brought on like the deputy director of NIDA. I brought on like
Mhm.
some of the top neuroscientists and people in the
Nice.
mental health space, yeah, to talk about what it does to the brain. And I think the message was clear on that as well. It's like, if you're doing it legally and healthily, like no one's telling you to stop, but the
Sure.
idea that there's benefits to it from a mental health perspective is just false, right? And so I think that's going to be the next sober curious movement, is
Mhm.
to quit weed and see what it does to people, and people realize how much it kind of has the same grip on people for the people who drink every day. And then I think in tandem with that, I think vaping is going to be the next one
Yeah,
too. It's,
actually,
I know we were texting about that,
yeah.
and it's wild to me that that's not talked about more.
The reliance on marijuana.
Or no vaping.
Oh, vaping. Yeah. I think in many cases vaping can be worse than cigarettes if people aren't controlling the
Totally.
amount of nicotine that they're consuming. Because even if they're not smoking tobacco, if they're getting addicted to nicotine and it's pushing their behaviors in ways that they wouldn't do or they wouldn't go through if they weren't vaping, um, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's not the same thing as tobacco. Like they're not inhaling the same materials, but they're still heating up a vapor and inhaling it into their lungs. And I don't know. I mean, there's going to be research that comes out eventually that shows that it's likely going to be associated with increased risks in lung cancer whenever it comes out. But we have to acquire that evidence, and until we do that, we can't make strong conclusions. But
Right.
it's the same thing, just a different mask, in my personal
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
professional opinion.
Correct. I agree with you 1,000%. Going back to alcohol, for
Hmm.
the people that say that the Surgeon General's warning is just fear mongering, I mean, do you believe that what he's saying is 100% accurate, and that that people like should be as afraid as some of these articles that are coming out about it say?
Um, no, like so, I don't mean to laugh, but it is kind of comical that people would say that the Surgeon General is being a fear monger about alcohol because we've known this stuff for decades, arguably a millennia, regarding ethanol consumption and
Hmm.
alcohol consumption. So um, I think people just want to, point a finger and act upset on social media to get clout without really understanding the context of the particular situation. Um, and I think really that's just it. The Surgeon General is 100% correct. So I don't know how to make that simpler for people. We've
Right.
known this information for a long time, so I think people just want to complain to just be in a camp of people that complains yet again on the internet and pisses everyone off. And realistically, those people are the ones that are fear mongering, not the Surgeon General.
Right.
They make it very difficult for myself and many other people who mean well as scientists to educate people about the concerns of ethanol consumption or alcohol consumption. Um, we're not trying to scare anybody. We're just trying to make people more aware that there's a certain volume of alcohol that they consume that will be dangerous for them. The same way we talk about tobacco smoke, the same way we talk about eating ultra processed foods. It's the same argument, again, just a different mask, and everyone's going to get upset at some point um, about this. And it's
Right.
just the cycle of how these things go, and it's really annoying at this point.
Um, One, I had a question come in, or there were several, but one of them that came to mind was:
Sure.
Is it like does it work in the way that somebody drinks for 10 years, now they're getting cancer, or can people like turn their risk around by changing their lifestyle?
So from the studies, what we see is any amount of alcohol is associated, even if like minimal drinking, even if I had one drink a day, is associated with an increased risk. Um, that absolute risk is likely much less than 1%. So if somebody drinks for 10 years, they're at risk, but that absolute risk, they might be putting themselves overall at risk for, I guess,
Mm.
these 8 different types of cancers now, maybe up to 5% max, 5 to 10% maximum. But there are things, I mean, even if I'm a lifelong alcoholic, there are things that I can do to help reduce my risks, but they can't necessarily reverse damage. So if I've drank so much over time that I induce scarring in my liver, in this case, steatosis is the medical condition in my liver induced by alcohol. If I induce that damage, I can't reverse that because the liver cells, they can't repair themselves in a way to reduce that scarring.
Hmm.
But if I have drank for 10 years, I can begin to integrate exercise and try to eat better, better nutritionally, to try and reduce risks that have come from my excessive alcohol consumption in the past. So it's not that I can reverse the trajectory of the disease. I can do things now going forward. So something that I try and tell my followers is that understanding the things that they've done in the past is important to know what they can do going forward. It's often not really important to hyperfixate on all the things that they have done. It's more important to focus on what they can do going forward in reducing risks, because you can't change the past.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah. And so what are some of the things people can do to reduce risk?
Yeah, and it's the simple basic things, and it's something that when people sign up to my newsletter, I gave them the 5 tips. Even if somebody hasn't drank their entire life, this is going to apply to everybody, and that's, try and focus on effective sleep habits. Try and consume a nutritionally rich and diverse profile of foods, both plant and animal based. Not hyperfixating on just protein, because there's a variety of different other macronutrients in our foods that we need to consider, like fiber as an example, and vitamins. Of course, trying to minimize the amount of alcohol that we consume. That's the topic of discussion here, obviously. Right. Minimizing the amount of smoke. In this case, it could be marijuana, it could be vaping, it could be tobacco smoke. Trying to minimize those as much as possible. And that's pretty much it. Another thing I also tell people is trying to minimize their exposure as much as possible to, ultraviolet B radiation when we go outside, and ionizing radiation in general. Something like wearing appropriate clothing if you're knowing you're going to be outside, or an appropriate SPF 30 plus sunscreen, reapplying it as necessary. It's the basic standard things that people like to argue about online, that they say, oh, these things are stupid. Focus on this biohacking crap. Take this supplement. Cover yourself in coconut oil instead of SPF. And maybe avoid all the seed oils. It's not that crap. It's the 5 basic things that I've just said that are going to keep people or reduce risks as much as possible.
Last thing I would love to cover, just as it comes to my mind, is you mentioned the 1 to 2 drinks per day. Mm-hmm. What type of drink? I mean, because there's beer, there's wine, there's vodka, and all those have different types of alcohol, different amounts of alcohol in them.
Sure. Yeah. So this is of course based on the amount of ethanol within the drink. Obviously, there are some beers that have higher ethanol content. I should pay attention to that if I'm going to drink them. But this could be like 1 to 2 glasses of wine, depending on the type of wine. 1 to 2 8 to 12 ounce beers. Mm-hmm. Again, depending on the beer, and like a shot and a half of liquor, like 40 proof liquor. Your body can handle that, but anything outside of that, I would say even 1 to 2 drinks of those per day is excessive. But that's the baseline. It's the bare maximum that people should be, focusing on. Obviously, less is better here. 1 8 ounce beer is fine. A glass of wine, 6 to 8 ounces is perfectly fine. With the occasional dinner, having a shot in a cocktail like a margarita, or, let's say your best friend buys you a tequila shot at the bar, which happens to me occasionally. And, you got to drink it. You can't turn your friend out, as we talked about social pressure.
Right.
Maybe just, tone it down the rest of the night when people are still drinking or whatever, and just try and be conscientious of the amount of ethanol we're consuming. But those are general volumes as guidelines.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on to discuss this. People are going to get a lot of value out of it, and I appreciate what you do, man.
Of course, man. I appreciate it. And it's been a long time coming to be able to talk to you on this podcast. And it's an honor and privilege, man. I appreciate it.
You got it.